What's up, guys, and welcome back to the infamous project. We're plugging away at Chuck's 91 GT here, and if you guys haven't been following this project, make sure to kind of do a rewind into the Wayback Machine of YouTube and check out some of the history and progress we've made on this car. And we've really been moving here over the past couple weeks because I want to make sure that there's plenty of time to shake this car down and do all the final little touches, because you know what, getting motors and drivetrains in and everything is one thing, but then when you're getting into wiring, you're getting into custom interior tidbits and stereos and everything else, well, that all requires a lot of time too, not to mention shaking things down to make sure that everything is going to work and that the car is going to drive. And in this episode, there's a lot of those little things that we're talking: fuel system, brake system, intercooling systems, and then things like hood clearances and front bumper clearances. But these are all things that, you know, sound like they're pretty easy, but time adds up quick, and we're going to be going through a whole array of things, those little nitty-gritty things that, you know, you don't want fuel leaks, you don't want brake line leaks, you don't want any of those types of things. So we're going to be going through a lot of that, and hopefully you guys enjoy this episode, so stay tuned. How are you feeling? Eating your Wheaties today? It does. Oh, the gear. Alright, you bet if you can. There. Yep, I got it right there. Alright guys, so we're back at the shop here trying to get Chuck's fuel system sorted out today. And you can see shop's getting a little full here. Twin turbo car undergoing some tuning. There's going to be some videos on that. We got the Dutch roller all the way from Canada. Shop dad brought that down the other week, so that is here. War Admiral, got to get on that build, man. And then I'm actually in the process of working on some tuning for Jerry's 93 Coyote swap. You can see here we're on HP tuners with the TDN network and doing a remote. I'm actually just sending the current stock tune file so that they can get everything sorted out at Palm Beach Dyno. And it's sweet. There's no cable, guys. It's all off Bluetooth, directly up to your phone. And I'll go into more details on that in another video because, well, we're working on Chuck's car today. And you can see here, here's his fuel tank, brand new. And this is actually a Dorman tank. Guys, not to say you can't buy one from LMR. However, you buy one from Dorman, and here is your part number, 576106. You can get these off Amazon. They're painted. They're nice. They're coated, and they fit. They work. They do everything that a fuel tank needs to do and a little bit more. However, I do have LMR parts. Do have a new tank strap kit and some hardware here, which the hardware is interesting. They actually use studs that go into the threaded, I forget what the technical name for these guys is, but yeah, instead of a long bolt going up, you actually get a stud and a nut. And what else do we got going on here? New sending unit, fuel level sending unit, new tank grommet, new evap, doohickey thingamabob with a grommet in there as well. This valve, right, vent valve. So we got our dash 8 line here, and that's going to go to the fuel filter. I'm going to do the return line now, which that's going to be an extra long line because it's going to run all the way pretty much to the front of the car. The pickup here, in case you guys are wondering, this is a Quantum pickup assembly with, I believe, a Holley Sniper fuel pump. With that said, you can get their pickup assemblies like this with a dash 8 and dash 6 ready to go. Comes with a new wiring harness here. You can see I kept the original one in this harness because, you know, I could cut that out and maybe I will. it's one of those things. The first thing that I went to is like, well, if you can keep the stock stuff there just in case, but I don't know. I'll see how I feel about that. The important thing here is that I do want to make sure that we have a really good power run to the fuel pump in this case, because this guy's going to be drawing a little bit more current. Even though it says it's 15 amps, you know, Castle Customs has done his video, and we'll probably be using the factory fuel pump wiring to trigger a relay to send, you know, proper voltage to that pump. So if we look up here, I've already got the fuel filter mounted up here, right? So got a fitting mocked up here, so this is where the main will come, so it'll kind of do a swoop like this and around, then we'll come out on this side, and from there, all right, we're gonna have to figure out our routing. So that's the name of the game, using PTFE line. So you can see this is our -8, and this is our -6, and some of you might say, oh, well, that looks kind of small. Well, not really. So even though the threaded ends are directly compatible with, you know, your AN style fittings, let me show you something. So I've done this comparison before. So you see the braided steel line, and then we have the braided PTFE line. This one looks substantially smaller than this one, and it's not just because it's black. The outer diameter of a PTFE line is much smaller than an AN line. And the reason for that is the inner diameter is actually the same, okay? But see how thick that rubber is in there? And this is a little smush, so it might not be the greatest example, but that rubber is super thick. The nylon PTFE is thin, because, well, the wall of the PTFE can take a lot more, and this is actually E85 friendly, versus this stuff that is not. E85 will eat the rubber over time, which you do not want. So you get the same size, or I guess flow possibilities out of a smaller line, and I like this because this is like a cloth coating versus the steel. You know, this rubs up against your paint, it scratches stuff, can do damage in places where you don't want it to, whereas this has got a softer coating. So that's why I like the PTFE, and the fittings are pretty straightforward to put on. A little bit different than an AN. There's kind of one more step to it. You got to put that little metal ferrule on there so that things clamp down and hold the line in place. So that is the main difference between an AN line and a PTFE line. And reality is you can, you know, mix the two, because the fittings, right, like when you're going on here, like this stuff is all the same. A -8N is, or -6, -8, whatever, they're all the same on that side, but the fittings that go onto the hose side are in fact different. There we have it. Gas tank went in smoothly, freshly painted up gas tank cover, and I just hit that, I scuffed it down, I hit it with SEM trim black paint. So it's a little dusty right now, but it looks fresh. The camera probably makes it look really nice. So one thing that I want to share with you guys, because I'm sure I'm not the only one who's run into this, and it's just sort of like a little, I don't know, a tip, if you will. So whether you've got the aftermarket, you know, replacement, the stud style, or you're trying to run the bolt through, see this gap right here? And same thing over here, we have a little bit of a gap. And especially with, guess, changes in fuel tanks and just aftermarket things aren't necessarily 100%. Hell, it could be the straps, but just sometimes you feel like the tank is in there and it's not going anywhere, but you don't have enough You know what I mean? You don't want to keep torquing this down, or sometimes you end up putting too much torque on your bolt, then you snap this bracket off the edge, and then things start spinning on you and you're in for a bad time. So what I do is, once I'm happy with where this tank is sitting, and trust me guys, it is up there. I've looked, and you want to be careful, right? Like when you're tightening that stuff up, you want to make sure that your lines aren't pinched and that you can move your vent tube, your return, and your main, and that everything is doing what it should, okay? And then once you've got that all sorted out, you can put a little spacer in here, okay? And that spacer will take up the difference and it'll allow you to butt this right up against, you know, in confidence, so that there isn't, you know, this gap that's about a finger worth of, right, distance of open thread there. That's something to keep in mind when you guys are putting your new fuel tank in, old fuel tank, with new straps or whatever it might be that is giving you just that little worry that you don't want to tighten it up anymore. So now the name of the game is, right, so this is the return in the vent tube. This return line is, that guy's going all the way to the front. So we can figure out how we're going to plumb that. But right now I want to focus on the main, which is right here. And it's going to go into the filter right here on this side. So you can see I've decided to use a 45 here going into the filter. So I'm going to measure once, measure twice, cut once, and we'll get this fitting on. And then from there, we're probably going to end up with a 90 off the back side of the filter here, or maybe a 45. We'll see. We'll test out a couple different scenarios and we'll go from there. Moving right along here, and see, we got our main. Really want to show you guys. So, all right, main line coming. You can see it's not binding up or anything there. There's our return line. Same thing, no binds. The vent tube is hiding up behind that. You can't see it, but it's good, okay? In our fuel filter, out of our fuel filter, the return line's tucked up here, and the extra excess vent hose is there. Put a spacer up on the strap mount there that we talked about to take up that gap. Okay, so then the return line and the main line are here. Now this isn't permanent. You can see I've used zip ties to kind of just temporarily hold everything in place. And this line naturally sort of wants to coil on you, so you got to be careful when you're running it through stuff and or around stuff, so that you don't end up kinking the line, because it will want to kink on you. So right here is a question mark, right? Because there's probably going to be a muffler most likely here. All right, so the factory lines kind of do a thing here and then come along here, but when we're coming up and over the way that we are, and this will all be kind of secured, you can see the bump stop has been removed out of this car. So we just want to make sure that we get in a spot, and I'm going to be using clips and connectors and probably use some of the factory stuff, so that you can make sure that these lines don't have an opportunity to touch the top of the pumpkin or get caught or bound up in the upper control arm mount or any of those other things. And that includes heat from, right, we don't want fuel line melting off a muffler or off a tailpipe. So that's why the factory lines kind of go up and over through here, and depending on what tailpipes you're running, that can make things a little challenging sometimes. So it's something you definitely want to make note of. We got emergency brake cables to factor in here. So the question will be is, where exactly is going, like, am I going to run this? This e-brake cable does its stuff right here with this guy, right? Kind of Y's off and splits to here, then goes off to either side. And then we have the drive shaft to worry about. But one thing, because the engine bay is all shaved up, here's all my fuel lines here. So the mains and the returns coming off the rails. So what I actually want to do, where typically your factory fuel lines end up coming up in the inner fender area here, right? And then they end up, right, kind of going, so come up in your inner fender and then they come along the frame rail and your factory lines end up here, right? And then from here, you can kind of decide, all right, what you want to do. But in our case, in some people's case, when they run these lines, they'll run them through that hole right there, which has been welded up and sealed. So that is not an option unless we drill out something in the engine bay. So the question is, where do we want to mount the fuel pressure regulator? And it's probably going to be up and back there. And I think there's enough room, you know, to be safe. You can even kind of tell by looking at these lines, kind of to run the lines straight up through here in the transmission tunnel. Right, get a bracket like in this kind of area, hold them, tuck them up and around over here so that they're away from the long tubes, any exhaust, and we can get the regulator kind of in where it would be if we ran them through the inner fender on the backside. So it's probably what I'm going to do. And the main is actually going to Y. Running an 8 AN main line, that 8 is going to split off to 2 6s. And that's feeding the back sides of both rails, and then the return stuff will all end up going through the fuel pressure regulator. All right, so off each rail coming in, and then this will be the return line. So this is actually the original regulator that was running all of these AN lines, and now that we're on PTFE and you know, we don't really have much red stuff in the engine bay, we got this little compact regulator here. So this is going to be the guy that we're running. And then we got our fittings and a gauge so we can monitor and see what our fuel pressure is. So yeah, I'm going to get this guy together. We'll find a spot in the engine bay where it's going to go, and then we can finalize our fuel lines here. I guess the biggest word of advice in this case is just don't commit to anything until you've factored or mocked up as much stuff. Like if you don't feel comfortable that you know exactly everything that you need to account for, well, mock the exhaust up, mock the drive shaft up. Just make sure, because it's not the end of the world if you have to rerun your fuel line. But if you went through and you got it all bundled together and you got it little brackets and everything else, or clips, however you're holding it down, and then you got to go back through and move something, it kind of sucks. So it's sort of like the whole measure twice, cut once principle. So anyways, I'm going to do a little bit more research here, and then we'll come back to it and carry on as always. All right, guys, so bumper cover's on. Got all the brackets, I think, the best that they're going to be, and you can see that front bumper cover is going to be resting right up against the intercooler. You can see the sag that he had from not running his fog light bracket, that support that goes underneath. So once that's on there and we have everything bolted on the way that it should, then it's going to straighten everything out. You can see where he actually had a couple little war wounds here and here. That was just from the stress. So those got stapled from the back side. Again, when the car's down on the ground, it's really hard to see that. But all right, so as soon as everything is buttoned up, this should be looking the part and doing everything that it should. Now you can see this is how much room I have here. I took the brackets off, and these guys are just going to be too wide, okay, to fit in there. And I need to wait until the new condenser shows up, and then I'll be able to come up with the master plan for that. Now, I just want to show you guys the feet. It's kind of hard to see on that side. Hard to see on that side. Oh, here. So as you can see, the feet aren't near as wide as the bracket is, so I have a feeling I'm going to end up doing something custom with this bracket in order to hold this guy in place. And these are just pop riveted on, So I have a feeling I'm going to be able to do something fairly easy, and I actually already have an idea in mind on how I'm going to fix this. Guys, this is what happens when you go down the rabbit hole. Even for a fog light bracket, you know, getting that painted up and looking good using Seymour Cast Blast. And you know what I mean? It's not the original finish, but it actually probably looks better than the original finish because it'll keep all the oxidization and everything else down. So there is the difference, guys. A lot of people don't care about the little things, and it's all in the details. And you know, I mean, it's time, and this is the stuff that nobody ever sees. But when you are cleaning undercoat and debris and grime off of the fog light brackets and repainting them, you know you got problems. Okay guys, so I need to get Chuck's motor to sit down further. So I'm actually, you can see I've got an extremely well padded 2x4 underneath the oil pan here. I've got the motor jacked up enough where the motor adapter plates are loose. So what I'm going to do is just pull these out, and I'm going to elongate the holes where the motor mounts go into, and I'm hoping that they'll want to go down a little bit further. The other thing that I'm going to do is actually loosen up here, and on the mount itself, if I have to open these up and get them to get tucked a little closer to the motor, as far, I want them right up against the motor, because the closer they are that way, okay, the further it's actually going to allow the mount itself to want to sit down in this plate here. So that's a little trick, because we're already running convertible style motor mounts, and if you want your motor to sit down as far as possible, you guys are trying to run a stock hood, well, those are some of the tricks that you can do to get your motor to sit down just a little, because sometimes all you need is that much, right? Elongated a little bit more. So before I put this in, like I said, I'm going to pull the actual mount off and try and get it over as far as I can. See if you're touching the block, you see that amount of movement? It doesn't seem like much, right? But if you really look, it's actually quite a bit. Alrighty, back at Chuck's front end, we got our brand new condenser from Rock Auto here, and I've got it held up with zip ties up into the upper support brackets right here. So this is kind of giving us an idea of where this guy would typically live if we were using the factory brackets. And if you guys are not familiar with the factory brackets, they normally bolt on here, so they slide on in here, right? And then that's how they would go on both sides. Now, what I've done is I've taken the clip off here, and I've put the clip in on this hole, and the same thing that the clip was here, I've put it in here. So it's a little off center, if you will. I really don't think that that's going to be a big deal. So what I'm going to do is quite simple. I'm going to do a little bracket or an arm that's going from here up to here and utilizing these holes here. And we know that using those holes isn't a big deal because, well, that's what they do over here with their pop rivets, right? So that's exactly, we're going to kind of mimic that, if you will. And so there'll be 1 point down here, probably 2 points here, and that'll be that. That's going to hold this guy in place, and it's going to give us enough clearance to get the intercooler in, because that's the problem. This is too wide, it sticks out too far, and our intercooler is going to be like right here, And you can see this guy sticks out probably an inch further than we need. So once we get that all in place and buttoned up, we're going to be good for final intercooler positioning. So we're plugging along here, and you can see got our brackets down here underneath, and this is a very common problem, especially with the aftermarket retainers up here. I'm going to show you guys a really good hack, and it's not always just because of aftermarket retainers. Sometimes it's just these aftermarket condensers, the way that these little support U's or brackets, whatever you want to call them. So let me show you a quick little way to fix this and make sure that your condenser stays in place. See how it's got like these ridges, and they expect you to put that U like in here? Like, this is pushing things away. This isn't helping stuff stay in place, right? So all you do is pop it out like so, or even just twist it. Boom. And what do you know? You now have an indented or recessed groove that's going to keep your condenser in place by that groove going right into this U. Like, who would have known? So I'm just going to drill off these brackets down here because they're not really required, and the back sides are kind of close to the lower radiator support, so I don't want anything vibrating against there. And we'll bolt it in. That'll probably be the last time that needs to get bolted in. That'll be done. Bolt the intercooler back on, and we can actually start getting around to bumper support, fog light bracket, fog light, or lower bumper support and fog light brackets. Condenser's in. Intercooler is loosely put on. I've made some little brackets that are going to go from here to here just to stabilize these sideways L brackets, and that should keep the intercooler in position. Yeah, I'm gonna have to just kind of make a little spacer. I will run this from the back side. I need to get some hardware that's not as long and that's going to fit properly, and the intercooler will be able to be bolted in for the last time. Of course, we will put the front bumper cover back on. Well, after, in fact, we'll get this stuff bolted on. We'll test fit that front bumper cover, make sure everything is looking good, and then I'm not going to put it on yet because I want access to all of the intercooler piping here. So once all of that is finalized, then we will put the front bumper cover on once and for all. And we have now got the intercooler bolted up, the AC condenser bolted up, radiator, well, it was sort of already in there. It is not bolted up on the top because I don't know what we're going to go with in terms of hold downs, but I did test fit the front bumper cover one last time. Everything fits real nice, and like I mentioned, I had to do just a tiny little bit of trimming right here. Chuck, I know you're watching this, so can't even tell. All right, just enough to keep it from rubbing on a few of the intercooler fins here, but you can see, all right, just kind of utilized some of the factory holes and whatnot. I had to modify this bracket a little bit, but all the bolts work for the rebar support, which I am now going to attempt to bolt on and see if we can't get that and the fog light brackets and the lower support bracket for the bumper and everything finalized up here. And of course, I got to get the little metal support plates in the bottom there to pull that in. Our bumper supports are lining up here. which is good. And there'll be a little bit of movement, like final placement of things, but the bumper, you know, I've just got 2 little screws in there just for proof of concept. So if you look under here, you can see there's a little bit of trimming that I did just to make sure that nothing is going to hit, because wind is going to do that when Chuck is traveling at high speeds. Whoops. There goes my makeshift clip. So we got our intercooler, little brackets for the AC condenser, and we'll be able to get our little flappy guy bolted on here, a little deflector to get some wind to roll on up. And our wiring harness for the headlight harness is passed through. Got some stuff dangling here. So we'll be tidying all this stuff up. If you guys remember, still need to figure out pinning for this guy and get the engine side of the harness all sorted out to that guy. But other than that, this is nice and straight now, so Chuck doesn't need to worry. There's those little cracks. So these are plastic welded or staple welded from the backside to keep those from, you know, getting any worse. But again, when you're looking up from above like this, you don't see those. So everything is looking really, really good. Need to figure out what fog lights are going to go in here. And that's good. So the bumper will most likely come off again so that I can figure out the last little bit of the intercooler piping. But it's coming along. It is coming along. Okay, so we're back underneath Chuck's car here and was waiting for parts to come in. If you remember, we were having some hood clearance issues, and I've tried all of my tactics to try and get this motor to sit down a little further, and well, I can't get it down far enough to clear. So I've tried, you know, honing the holes out a little bit on the mounts to get the mount as close to the motor as possible, which would allow this guy to sit further down into, you know, the groove, which I've did a little bit of clearancing there to try and get the mounts to sit down further in the K-member. And although I was successful a little bit, I was not successful enough. So what does that mean? Well, I've done a lot of research and I've come across these solid drop mounts. And you can see they are solid, okay? And we're going to be installing those and seeing what happens in terms of the height of the motor in the bay. Now, the first thing that you guys are going to be thinking of, and this is where my mind went, solid mounts is going to equal vibrations. It's going to lessen the ride quality. And guys, I'm an advocate to have bushings and some sort of insulator wherever you can, especially in my case when my cars are so low. But throughout my research, I've found that a lot of people argue that as long as you don't have some crazy camshaft, and if you did, it'd be more prominent at idle. But as long as your motor is balanced and you don't have other issues going on, solid mounts for the engine only, as long as you keep your transmission mounts non-solid, you'll be okay. It said that combining engine solid mounts with transmission solid mounts, you're going to be in for a pretty rough time, quite literally. So again, I have not gone down these roads before. A lot of people are going to have opinions. A lot of people are going to be like, oh, my buddy did it and this is what happened, or I heard through a friend of a friend, and you know how that goes. So we're going to go for it. And I guess the last resort, if this will work, I'm confident that it's going to work. It's going to give us the clearance that we need. But if for whatever reason, like it's shaking the body of the car, or it doesn't feel like things are doing what they should be doing, then the last resort is going to be spacing the K-member down. And the reason why I don't want to space the K-member down, because I've got the parts literally right here. So here are K-member shims, right? So that's for the front side, that's for the bottom side near the floorboards there. Is that if we do that, that's going to change the ride height by 1/2 inch. right? So where we're sitting nice and tucked with the air all the way out, front and back, what would happen is the front's going to be on a little bit of a squat. And the last thing that we want to do is have a squatted fox body. So that is going to be the end resort. And if we have to do that, then we're going to look at possibly some other things to correct the overall ride height. But this is a quick and easy, and I want to try it because I haven't tried them before, and you just kind of read all these opinions and feedback online without actually knowing truth or firsthand experience riding in a car that has solid mounts. So the other thing that is going to be interesting about dropping the motor down, and they're supposed to drop down almost an inch, is will there be a problem here with the transmission? Is the motor going to be slanted? And that was kind of Kazel's first thought. He's like, oh, is it going to, you know, push the tail shaft of the transmission up, change pinion angles? Well, pinion angles get changed every single day when we lower a fox body. Question is how much angle or how much movement is going to happen back here? So I'm going to take a measurement. I'm going to take a measurement from the tail shaft to kind of the floorboard up there for where the shifter goes through. We're going to do it before and we're going to measure it after and see what the difference is. If it's a big difference, we could probably look into a different mount. The other thing that I feel like is going to help with this scenario is the way that these motor mount plates are, because there's mounting bolts that bolt them in, and I feel like that is going to allow for more disbursement of any vibrations or anything else, because those plates are almost separate from the K-member. It's not like these are welded solid. Now, even though they're bolted, right? But bolted versus welded are kind of two different concepts. So I don't know. There's only one way to find out, and that's to install them. So I'm going to get my jack post and carefully get up underneath the oil pan here, lift the motor up enough so we can get those original motor mounts off. We're going to put the drop motor mounts in. And one other thing that I know could be an issue is this line, right? We're going to have to see what the clearance looks like here on the rack versus oil pan, because we don't have too much there. I am going to measure from right there, okay? And we're going to go right to, let's find like a common or an easy spot. And I'm going to say 5 3/4 inches. So I'm going to the center of this hole. Okay, 5 3/4. Now, the interesting thing right now is that if we look at the angle of everything, and this is the car, the air ride and everything sagging down, we probably have a little bit of an angle here on the drive shaft, right? So drive shaft would probably, it'll rotate up once we get weight down on the car. And we're going pretty straight here. And I feel like that there's actually room for that tail shaft to go up, to be quite honest with you, because right now it is doing this. And it could be an optical illusion, but I genuinely feel like it is doing this right now. Five and a half. So it's changed the angle by 1/4 of an inch here. I might have to bend a new one of these. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that in there, or I'm going to have to take it off there, get this side in, and try and creatively bend it. But yeah, I think the motor's sitting pretty straight. So I don't know, let's see. Let's put the car down and see if the hood closes. So first things first, I'm kind of just looking at how much space and room is back here. There might be enough to get the motor back just a little bit more. Everything else looks like it's clearing okay. So, well, let's see if our hood will close. Okay. It'll go down. It's pivoting a little bit. See how the back of the hood is going up? That means that it's pivoting on something. It's pivoting right there on that microfiber. Kinda, you see where that was clearanced? Same thing kind of needs to happen on this side. So some minor massaging. And I'm gonna try and get the motor back to that second notch in the motor mount. And if it moves it back, it should be a little further away from things, I would think. But let's see. So I'm gonna move it back into that other slot and then we'll do another test. Okay guys, so I've put 2 washers to shim the motor up a hair by going back further, because otherwise we wouldn't have had clearance to the oil pan there. And now I'm trying to do some fancy modification to this power steering line to see if I can't get it to work. And no lifting in the back. In fact, we gotta do a little bit of alignment there, but we'll deal with that when we do the new hood hinges. There you go, Chuck. Motor is in with a stock hood. We are now, guys, we're almost still 5 3/4. Look at that. And maybe because, you know, I've bolted this guy down a little bit, it's corrected things, but we still have that nice drive train line. You can see we've got our clearance here, and that's how the motor mounts look installed, right? Still need to tighten the bolts up, or the nuts on the bolts. So there you have it, guys. The verdict is not in on how this is going to idle or feel. However, we have solved some major problems, and I know that Chuck isn't the only one out there. There are a ton of people that refuse to run a cowl hood or anything but the factory hood. You know, when you got something that's all low mileage and original, you know, I completely understand it. So yeah, pretty cool, right? So we'll just have to make sure that things aren't going to vibrate and rattle. And you know what? I don't think they are. Again, you know, for a couple of reasons. Those plates, motor mount accepting plates the way that they are, the fact that we still have, you know, factory transmission cross member with the traditional bushings in there. We do have a bushing on the bottom side, and this isn't the red, this is the black, which is a little softer. So for those reasons, I think we're gonna be okay. But I'm gonna start locking everything down. I'm gonna tighten up the nuts and bolts for the motor mounts, tighten up the transmission, the cross member, get everything tightened and buttoned up so that way, you know, when we do get this car running and we want to move it, everything will be hopefully good to go. And I had to get these guys for the rear end here, so you got to tighten up the nuts on our aluminum drive shaft, but everything is doing what it should. This is all looking good now. And speedo cable, I think I have one of those somewhere. You have to get that plugged in. All right guys, so I'm just finishing up the final install for the fuel lines. So you can see coming over there over top of the pumpkin, all right, because there's our filter. So we kind of have everything spaced out in a way strategically so it's not where the pumpkin can possibly, you know, bounce up and pinch a line. So we'll have, I'm just gonna go and mark, and I've mocked up this, you know, Flowmaster muffler here, which is probably the biggest of all muffler options that are out there. So kind of having that in mind, right? I want to make sure that no matter where this muffler is positioned, so, and then we have emergency brake cables to consider as well. So this is pretty much the way that things are going to go, right down the transmission tunnel. So I'm going to mark where I'm going to put my inserts. All right, so fuel system all buttoned up here. Well, probably got That a little straightened up. Y block is right here, going up towards the rails. Got brake lines all mocked up here. Follow down here along the K-member. I'm gonna get like little support tabs, kind of hold the line in place or build something, not just leave zip ties, so don't worry about that. Straighten out the lines a little bit. You can see up there, bottom of the master cylinder. And everything's looking good. Managed to get that power steering line to work with a hair of clearance there, hair of clearance around here. And yeah, I had to massage that. It is a custom line right where it goes in here, so I wanted to try and make that work. And other than that, I think we're in pretty good shape. The drop motor mounts are in. So finish up some of the intercooler piping. Now I can commit to radiator hoses and got to order up power steering pump lines. And what else? Get the ground on, build a ground strap for the block. And actually that'll be convenient to probably get it right to the sway bar here now that we're mounted on the underside of the frame rail. Things are coming along. This is probably a pretty good stopping point for this video because we covered a lot of stuff, everything from drop motor mounts, fuel system, a little bit of brake lines, intercooler, mounting, front bumper, clearances, hood clearances, all of those good things. So hopefully you guys found some informative information in here at one point or another. And until next time, we'll catch you back here on the Infamous Project.